to the very first live session for the Big Conversations by Ordinary People podcast. We are really glad it's happening at the KTS Symposium. Thank you to the KTA team. Thank you to Kenneth for making sure that we are part of this. The conversations throughout the 2 days have been really part of what we are also trying to get out there with our podcasts. If you to listen to most of our conversations, they have been with creatives, they have been around control and data. So we do not take this opportunity for granted. We are grateful as a team and as people in the creative field. So with me, I have 3 people that are very, very significant in the creative field. I have Isabel, who is a creative. She's also into the law. I have David, who understands the music, the business of music, royalties. I have Kenneth, who's a lawyer and a regular on our podcast. People love his conversations. I am a big fan. I always have him on the podcast. So I'll give our guests 1 minute to just introduce themselves, but in a perspective of how they relate to the creative world and like how they're involved in the creative world, so that we kick off the conversation from there. David, I'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. I'm David Tayebwa, and I'm a musician, although I'm no longer on stage. Also get to know me as a music administrator, and I do music publishing, music rights management, copyright in music to be specific, and other related rights that come with music. I'm also a musicpreneur, just that I'm a musician who likes working with music as a product. So I look for money. Then I like fixing things, and especially fixing revenue that's coming from the industry. If you've been hearing about royalties, so my specialty is in royalty collection, royalty services. So that is David in short.
All right, Isabel.
Hello, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. It's a great opportunity. My name is Isabel Muhangi. I am firstly a lawyer and music enthusiast, really passionate about the role and relevance of art in society. I am also an artist under the moniker Isabel Eugene, Izabelug. I'm a multi-instrumentalist, singer, songwriter, and producer that is passionate also about causing music to make people think and feel. If we can get people to think and feel with our perceptions expressed through art, then that's the beginning of a revolution. That's the beginning of culture changing for the better, and that's my vision. I am also an editor on a blog I have, a Ugandan artist, that simply disseminates thoughts on the intermarriage between legal mechanisms in place for artists to benefit economically, as well as people, as humans, creating and embodying their perceptions and opinions within audio fixations, within visuals, basically within art. And also just my journey as a Ugandan artist bearing a post-colonial hybrid identity, in that I don't speak very much Luganda or Ruchiga, yet those are my parents' tribes, but I am a Ugandan artist and can comfortably say that. So those are the things I advocate for on that platform, and I'm happy to be here with you. Yeah.
Thank you, Kenneth. We'll have you, then we'll start the conversations.
Mark, thank you. My name is Kenneth Muhangi. I think first and foremost, like my fellow panelists, I'm also a singer, although only in my bathroom and when I am disturbing my wife and son. Beyond that, that dream to sing is manifest in my career. I am also an intellectual property practitioner. And music really is at the core of my practice, is at the core of my heart. And so I am very honored to sit on this podcast as a creative and as a lawyer that understands creatives.
Well, thank you. We'll just go into the deep stuff from the beginning. I'll start with you, Kenneth. I would wish you explain IP to a layman and what it means, yeah? So then we'll start from there to understand it to the guy that walks into our studio and they want to record a song. What does intellectual property mean to them, and of what value can it be to them?
The best way to try and break down intellectual property is to perhaps, if I was speaking to that fictitious gentleman or lady that you are talking about who just walked into a studio, the question that I'd ask them first and foremost is this. If you purchased land, or if you were given land, I think most of us understand to be a taka. So if you were given land, would you be comfortable for you to just be given land just by someone saying, I have given to you land? Is there anything you'd want to do to confirm and to show to other people that the land that has been given to you, that has been bequeathed to you, is actually land that belongs to you and no one else will come and have a claim over that land? And ultimately, if you can then go and process a land title, if you insist as well on keeping your land title in a very special place, I think there's also that question there is asked that if a building was burning, what things would you take out? For many people who have their titles in their homes, they will say, my land title, because they know the cost and the hassle of trying to process a land title. So intellectual property is really a title over creations of the mind. And as an artist, it is important for you to be able to get a land title, in this instance, copyright certificate over a song, over an art piece, over a design, over computer software. But since we're looking at music in particular, for you to be able to enforce or to register the copyright that is in your song, and that copyright, if I may just break that down further, copyright is a form of, copyright is an intellectual property right. Yeah. And a copyright is really the right to copy, which is the right for you to be the only person, in that it grants you a monopoly, it grants you an exclusive right to deal with your music with the way that you want it to be dealt with, for you to distribute it on the platforms that you want it distributed on, and for you basically to earn money from it. But most importantly, and I say that of course for many musicians, perhaps we, well, I'm saying we now since I already introduced myself as a musician, but many musicians will mostly perhaps do music to be able to make money, but I feel that the most important aspect of music is perhaps that right to be recognized as the author of that particular song or piece of music that you have created. That's what in intellectual property we call a moral right, which is the right for you to be recognized as an author of a song.
All right. I think that's really as clear. When you bring in the line title, it makes a lot of sense to a layman. Now, since we are 4 people and it's more of a podcast, I'll just go on to every other panelist and try and get conversation from them. Now, Isabel, as an artist, and since these conversations are about commercialization of the entertainment industry, how much money do you make from music? How much money do you make from music to support your life as compared to how much from life do you make to support your music in our frame as Uganda?
Well, I don't know if that's tantamount to divulging my salary, but just generally not much, okay. Honestly.
Actually, no, it doesn't have to be like in giving me a figure, but I want you to make sense of it. Like, how much do you inject into the music as compared to what you get from the music to support your lifestyle?
Okay, so maybe if I continue with Kenneth's analogy of the land, copyright and those rights under that land title being like you buying land on Acacia Avenue and knowing it's prime land, so there's value, the aspect of value, and the aspect of expressing that value. So land on Acacia Avenue will be prime land because so many people are passing in that area, as opposed to the same square feet of land in Seta, Mukono. So when you are gauging how much you need in the first place to put in, just like you'd think about how to express value at Acacia, you're not going to set up a shack. It's going to be something as exquisite as a mall. So in the musical process and feeding that whole structure, it comes down to the ethos or the motivation an artist has. Just like the proprietor of Acacia Mall has one motivation, Kush Lounge on Acacia Avenue has another motivation, the offices and the banks have other motivations, but they're all expressing the value from that ability to be in a central area. So with creatives, if I could speak personally to mine, art for me, essentially, first and foremost, is an avenue of expression. And the particular word I'll use is catharsis. When you have this question, you have this emotion, you write it down, add that melody to it, confirm that this is the song, then go, that feeling is why I essentially write. But other artists have different motivations. So maybe someone wants to be a big global star, maybe someone wants to win a Grammy, maybe someone just wants to change culture, someone just wants to be remembered, or someone just needs to earn money to put food on the table. So answering your question begins from an analysis of those motivations, those values, and how it's expressed. So coming back to my own life, you need money to record the music, you need money to market the music, you need money to make a video if you're going to make a video. And just guided by those principles, you're going to see that maybe a job professional as a lawyer is enough to cater to those, or maybe for my next album with a vision of a visual album, I need to look for sponsorship. Maybe I need to talk to David and come up with a proposal to take to an entity that's interested in supporting creatives, take to the government, take to these businessmen that, support and are passionate about art. So that's what I can really say to help people answer that question by themselves. You understand an artist by their motivations, and what they do is what will come out. Because there are people who are content having a gig, just one gig. I don't need to make my own music. Doing covers for someone else is enough, because what's more important to me is a paycheck at the end of that gig. So it's just motivations and expressing a value you believe. If I feel my value with my music is, yes, I write amazing songs, but I don't need the whole world to hear them, then maybe I'll just share on Facebook. I have an EP out. But if it's something more global, I want to talk to distributors around the world. Can you partner with me to bring my art to your audiences? So, yeah, it just boils down to that, in my opinion.
Right, now, before I go on to David, looking at how Kenneth described IP and how you're saying at the end of the day it's a paycheck that matters, then one brings up the question of, doesn't intellectual property then reduce the chances of, say, an artist who's looking for a hit song so that it circulates in the market and they can make money off it before the streams? Doesn't IP then reduce the chances, since it reduces ease access to information? Does it reduce the chances of an artist like you becoming a success, since you do not want, you want to have total control of the music, but then with how the space and the industry you're operating in works, for music to get popular and to get all these bookings, it has to be played, it has to be accessible to people. All artists I know of, and I work from a production house, so I really work with a lot of creatives, but the goal and the dream they have is to just have the music out there, so from that, then they can make the paycheck by bars booking them out. Isn't IP, and this is open to all three of you, since all of you are lawyers, isn't IP then just something that is halting that with how we're operating?
Maybe I can briefly touch on that, and then Kenneth and David can add to that. Still with the analogy of land, it's like saying the fact that someone is required to have a land title curtails the opportunity for people to buy and purchase land, or for that land title to pass to someone else. What the government or what society and community is trying to achieve with having something like a land title is making sure that when you own land and you having those rights to that land, I don't come and step all over you with those rights. So Because you have a land title, there are less squabbles. If someone came and said, this part of your land is mine, all I need to do is bring out my land title and say, no, it is, or yes, it actually isn't. So it's the same thing with IP. IP is thinking about the person who has that right, what or who Kenneth was calling the author. If I come up with a song, there are different rights that he can dig into and David can dig into. He mentioned the moral rights. If I sing a song and I have a song by Isabel Eugene called Woo You, David can come up and say that this audio fixation is by David. It's by Isabel Eugene. And that's a right I have that actually promotes me in that space. In the bars, in the places and spaces you're talking about, why those spaces are useful is because everyone is going to ask, who sang that song? Yeah. And there's no doubt about it. It's going to be Isabel Eugene or Isabel Eugene. Because if it's someone else, it's not true. Just like if I claim to own the land title to Acacia Mall, that'd be a lie because I don't own it. So title and right within the realm of IP comes actually to do the reverse, to promote and protect the rights individuals have. Maybe, David, you can add to that, especially within the realm of music rights management, because that's economic rights.
I think as David adds to that, he could also try and break down how enforceable IP is in a market like we have, where, of course, we've not been operating with IP, so the fastest way is, again, for people to have their musics out there. When you look at, say, people who have stamped their positions in the music industry, say Bebe Cool, Bobby Wine, and Chameleon, when you look at how they were making money, Bobby Wine concentrated more on catchphrases. So he would release a song, then he would crack endorsement deals with corporate companies, and he would get money. Chameleon would clinch onto a song, then wait a whole year to do a concert and make money. Bebe Cool, entertaining, but almost the same frame. I've kept on listening to their conversations, but it all, when they look back in time, they say, since they didn't have IP, this is what works here. And IP, I had this conversation with Bebe Cool. He was telling me, this is what works, because if then there's IP, no one is going to play your music. People are going to be scared to be playing your music. So in this case, how is it enforceable to make it work?
Sorry. Okay, thank you. IP in itself is just a right. And it doesn't remove that liberty to be able to promote it. Because in the whole sense, music is meant to be listened to. So IP doesn't have a way it can limit the music to move. So you can move there. And to answer your last question, IP itself is big. But I can put it just into the music industry. The music industry, as you hear it, is not just one body. But there are many bodies, there are many pillars that work together. And all of these pillars have different products that they sell and also represent different IP rights. We usually put them into 3 pillars. One is that we have the recording industry. The recording industry is where you'll find artist managers, record labels, where you'll find the artists, the bands, the production managers, and all those guys. So, the product that they look at selling into the audience to make money is a brand. Because if I sign you as a label, I expect to elevate your brand, be popular. If you're known, then I'll make money from endorsements, from shows, and all that. So, branding itself has a type of an IP right in there. And it might come as an image right, or a trademark. A name of an artist is a trademark.
Yeah.
So the second part is the performing industry. The performing industry, of course, you'll find there the stage managers, the vivulu promoters, or event planners, event promoters.
Yes.
You even find there the artists, the bands that perform. However, the product that they sell is appearance. Imagine if you requested me to come to your show and you don't appear. That means even the people on that concert, the whole ecosystem, will not make money because you didn't appear. Even the person who sells Katogo in that concert will make losses. Yes. So it's that product that we are looking at. So performance has another type of IP rights. It can be one, the image rights, the photos you take while the singer is performing, but also we have other rights under copyright, like right of the broadcaster. If I'm performing live, yeah, who has the rights over the footage that you're capturing me on? Who has those rights? Those are called related rights within copyright. Then the last section of the industry is what we call publishing industry. The publishing industry will find there people that work with music, the product that you make in studios, the product that you write. Those are music publishers. You'll see that in that part, in that cluster, there are songwriters, audio producers, even the artists themselves. But also there are people like performing rights organizations. They are digital service providers like the Spotifys of now. Yeah. So the product that they sell in the publishing industry is music. And when you go into music, yeah, it has other rights in there, the IP rights. First of all, there is copyright. And copyright can even be sub-split into others. But the major ones, the major rights within the song, there are two. There is what we call a composition right. This is for the two people that sit together. Maybe an author wrote the lyrics, yeah, and also the producer or the beat maker made an instrumentation of the song. So they own composition rights. Then on the other side, if this composition crosses to the studio, there is an engineer that is supposed to help you to record, to mix the song and master it. So there's also ownership to that, and that is called a sound recording right. Falls in there. And it's owned majorly by the person whom you're listening to on that recording that they recorded, but also the person who financed the making of the recording. So it could be you that you finance yourself in the studio, or you are represented by a record label or a manager. So all those are different types of IP rights within just the music industry. You can't say they limit or do what, but they fall in and they work within the ecosystem that is available.
Well, where I say limit is look at a project like, let's say, Love and Light from Isabel. She released the whole project altogether. So that could work for me. I am going to listen to her music. I have Apple Music. I have Spotify. My circles will stream the music. But to one artist like, say, Gravity Omutuju, who has to release Mbuzi Zaku today to the local market, he needs to make sure that everyone listens to that song. So in the publishing, he does not, the organization almost curtails him, yeah, in the rights. And this goes back to the whole process from when he started creating the song. He gets into studio, and I've just used him as an example, but most of them, from my experience, from what I've listened to, He gets into the studio, pays the producer, then gets out, and then struggles and or puts all the effort into making the song a hit song, rather than having all utmost control to a project, make sure it's all organized, and then publish it in the right platforms. So this ideally should work for an artist like Isabel, but the hit song, the fight to get the hit song will put bread at Gravity's table. At the end of the day, he'll also pull off a concert, and that is what works. So this is where the question of limitation from IP comes in. Like, how is it enforceable for it to make sure it actually works? For me, like an underground artist, to understand that, look, if I do it the right way, I'm actually going to make money, because I still have to eat at home. I cannot wait throughout the whole process like a podcast.
Okay, what you have to understand and what you're missing out is that this person who has a right over this song also has exclusivity rights to do anything with that song. And they can even not decide to register it for IP. They have that right. So it's not really a limitation. Everybody has the way they work with their music. And it depends now on if you decided that your music should promote you and put food on the table, that is all with you. Yeah. But if you decided and you said, I need to make more money, more profit, those are royalties, even after when I'm not performing, then that is up to you. But the whole issue is that IP is something that can move with at any part, at any phase of creation, of publishing, of anything. So it's not really that you should put it up front, but it's that right that is sounding in silence that you should move out with. Yes.
And if I may, maybe just go, in addition to what he's saying, and just to kind of reiterate exactly what he's saying that IP is principles. Principles you can choose to exercise. They give you exclusive rights, right? So you can choose to do what you want with it. Just like if I had a land title and I have the right to demand rent from people, but I could also just make it free. You understand? So it's rights like that. And law and principles never exist in a vacuum. They exist in culture, which is why when you talk about Isabel Eugene's Love and Light and Gravity Mtuju, right there and then you see two different cultures. Even if you gave Isabel Eugene a Gravity Mtuju song, it's not going to come out because she doesn't identify with that. But why Gravity is who he is because the bigger demographic identifies with his life experience expressed within his song. Now, IP comes to find artists with these rights in cultural context. And it's what we've been talking about in the past 2 days. So yes, there's IP for spaces in the digital economy. There's all these laws, but the purpose of this symposium wasn't just to throw laws at people. It was to say, okay, we have this law, but let's discuss what it's like for you in the sector. We have this challenge, while it's like this is what actually happens. We have this benefit, we haven't yet looked at it. So it's the same discussion that we're trying to have, because right now, even I, as a budding artist, went into the industry thinking the only way to be an artist is to become big. So what is the metric of success when we all have different motivations? You understand? Am I an unsuccessful artist if I have these amount of streams on Spotify? And he has a different amount of streams, he's more successful? Success is always based on motivations, which is why a company will have KPIs, will have objectives, and say by the objectives we've decided for this quarter we have met them or we haven't met them. But if Facebook compares itself to Google and they all have a singular, comprehension of what success is, then you have this bland, regurgitation and copycat mechanism. But diversity is why creativity is respected in IP. That's what IP is, protecting your right to create differently. Yeah, so I don't know, Ken, what you want to add to that?
No, really, I think the two of you have spoken very eloquently. But as David was speaking, one of the things I wanted to stress is that copyright in particular is a right that you don't need to register. So whenever you're dealing with copyright, which is the intellectual property right that we're dealing with here, copyright is inherent. In the sense that as soon as you create something, that right exists. As soon as you pen down a song, as soon as you express that song, and you perhaps fix it, even beyond fixing it, there's a right that already exists in the lyrics. And so whenever we're discussing whether IP or whether copyright would work for an artist, I think the question shouldn't be whether copyright, for example, is hampering or is stopping an artist from reaping. Because if you're looking at copyright, and in the sense that I have just explained it, that copyright is inherent, the issues come around enforcement. Do I want to enforce my right in the song? And of course, you know, you're not on gunpoint for you to be able to enforce the right in the song. But I will say that, you know, there is a cause and effect with many things or with everything. And the cause and effect when it comes to enforcement of copyright, at least in the manner that we are proposing and in the manner that we are saying that you should register your copyright even when it is inherent, is that if someone else then tries to reap from your sweat, if someone tries to take a song from you, then you have recourse. You're able to go to court and you're able to prove that this song was mine. In the absence of that, it may be difficult to be able to do so. Number two as well, for most artists that have enforced copyright, and I think that's why, that is, I think, the biggest distinction between our music market and perhaps markets like the Nigerian, market, and even in Europe. Most of these entities, at least for the artists that we now listen to, streaming is what in many ways has made them as big as they are. But beyond that, if you're dealing with streaming, for example, copyright is a big, very big aspect of streaming, because these entities understand copyright, they understand the need for royalties, they understand the structure of music. And it follows that for many of those artists who are reaping from that, especially from how David told us that you're not only just looking at the rights in the song, but also the other rights that accrue as a result of you forming a brand. So it's easy for an entity, it's easy for other people who are helping you manage your music business to kind of package you and also are able to help you receive or get money in an organized manner, as compared to someone that does not have this organization or does not have the structure that someone that enforces copyright has. So just to sum that up, copyright in every respect, discussions around whether it works or not, around whether someone should enforce that right, but not that right existing on its own. That right existing on its own doesn't have the power to either kill your music or to stop other people from coming to your music. It's up to you as an artist to choose whether to enforce that or not.
All right. Follow-up question on that would be, is IP global? Can I steal a song from outside? I've also seen a lot of, let's say, in the mixes, when you look at a lot of the hit songs here, they're altered. The beats are a bit altered. So does this come back to bite these artists, or is it what works actually?
Well, of course, for the first part of your question, IP does not, or copyright in particular, does not only exist because of the laws that we have, in the sense that you have a law on copyright, and that's the one that actually enforces that. Isabel mentioned that we've had many discussions over the last few weeks, perhaps even longer than that, looking at the cultural context of intellectual property. Ultimately, we are here talking about intellectual property, and for some of you, you may think it is new. But if you actually remove the titles, if you actually remove even the legal aspect of it, you find that intellectual property or copyright exists beyond these titles or beyond the legal regime that we actually give it to. There's no artist I have met, or no artist, honestly, who creates, or any creative, who would not want, I feel, to be able to be associated with their creation, as long as at least that is their intention. Yeah. But that association and that need to be identified by either what they've created or that need to express, and that need to express or to the exclusion of others, is something that has existed with us for time immemorial. Growing up in my primary school, we sang many songs, and we knew that these songs, you knew that if you danced this particular dance, Baksimba, I'm actually not sure which culture that is from. Baganda. Huh? You knew that you had Akadodi, that one from the Bagisu. You knew that you had, I don't know, Ichtaguro from the Bachiga, you could identify that this piece of music is from a particular place. You don't need a lot to be able to tell you that a particular tune, a song, a beat, even an instrument that's used. Instruments that we have, many of the instruments that facilitate or that make us enjoy the music that we listen to also have intellectual property in them. And these instruments can be attributed to particular groups of people, to particular tribes, to particular races of people as well. Because I think now if you're looking at the global context, it stops becoming a sort of culture. It's now becoming, race. That there's black music and perhaps there's even white music. And so all those things really show us that when we are talking about intellectual property, we need to break that down to understand that even without these terms or with these phrases that we are using, IP exists in a global context. And there's no culture that cannot or that does not have perhaps music at its core.
All right. Now, in the interest of time, since we do not have so much, I would still ask all of you to give us and the listeners the core of enforcing and recognizing IP. Like, what's in for me? Right now, when you look at Apple Music, a friend of mine, Joshua Baraka, is trending #1 with an EP he just released. But what does that mean? I'm sure, because his manager is also one of my closest friends, I'm sure they have their music very registered, everything is moving on smoothly. But what does that mean? Is it just to trend? What do the streams mean to our market? And you talked about the Nigerian market. When you look at the Nigerian market, they also had a time where they cared so much about the hit songs. They've just transitioned into really packaging products into something beautiful. But for them to actually get there, they were doing what we're doing, where everyone is just fighting one song, they hit, and they just push it. Because artists, when you look at all my friends who are musicians, really prefer the first choice in their mind. I remember when we were doing the digital plan for Patayani with Rionga, the only thing on his mind was, I need the song to be in rotation. So wherever you can put it, whether I'm getting paid off it, whether what, I just need the people to know it so I can start doing the rotations in the bars. So when it comes to streaming, and we have jumped away from the lockdown where maybe it mattered, people could stream the music. Right now, what's the core of that? The numbers, trending #1. How does that help me, if, say, as a musician?
Okay, I'll answer that, but I would honestly be really curious, perhaps, to have David, I think, who is more...
Yeah, David would have the perfect answer. We'll just add to whatever he says.
Sorry?
Yes, David.
Okay, thank you. To draw back from what you had asked, IP rights global.
Yeah.
The music is within cultures, is scattered, as Kenneth explained. But when we come deep into music administration, we can enforce that, because music administration or copyright administration is based on territorial boundaries, territorial administrations. You have to understand that if a song is from Nigeria, then the Nigerian administration has control over it. You understand? So when we go deep into enforcement and copyright administration and collection management, there's that enforceability, especially regarding on territorial jurisdictions. Then, as you are saying, streaming is a huge thing. Do you need to understand the IP bit into that?
Well, I don't think, first of all, we have so much time, but I would want to understand the net advantage of it. Yeah. As in just the numbers and topping the charts, what does that mean to the artists? Do the streams, when it comes to money, I also am a publisher with this podcast. I know I've had quite a number of streams, but there's still no money.
Okay, you have to understand that streaming is another type like any other out of the many types of music markets. Well, I don't know if I could explain the whole market behind that, but streaming is what we call a mechanical market. Mechanical means you can be able to sell one physically. Records, let's say you put this music on CDs or flash disks and sell. Then there's streaming, where people go to these platforms and access and listen, pay for access. Then there's downloading, where people permanently copy songs from websites. But there are other markets. So there's no limitation to that. There's synchronization. I can be David, and I'm writing my songs, and my target market is my music to feature in a film, in a commercial advert. So there are many, many markets. However, the streaming's now currently the one trending because of the digital ecosystem. Everybody can access a song where they are, and they can listen without even owning it, downloading it, can listen and enjoy. So it's now the common mode of...
Can listen from the platforms chosen by the creator, yeah, to publish it. Now, ideally, promoters will just put the creation, and this goes to books, movies. I don't know when anyone last paid for anything that's not on Netflix, let's say series. So this also brings back what I had asked earlier on, if you've limited it to just platforms where you have total control, yeah? You know that my music or my creations are on these platforms, and then take it away from all these other platforms where all these other people have been accessing all this other information. Don't we then create with IP, because you see, to get on these platforms, you must have total ownership, yeah? So I'm thinking you must have trademarked your music and you control it. When we limit it to that, don't we then put an information gap? Because right now we've been accessing a lot of information from Telegram. I can just go Pirate Bay, download books, and get that. And that has helped our community. So once we limit and we put IP where there is like a standard measure, doesn't that then put a gap in information for people to access stuff? Even just the music, the message. Don't you miss out on putting out the message to some people as compared to having it really organized?
No, everybody has the right to put their music anywhere. And if you're talking about Apple Music and everything, some of these are limited even in territory. You'll find there's music on Cobas, a Chinese company, but we don't access here Cobas. Yeah. So, like all these other streaming markets are coming up and opening shop in Uganda, like Spotify, Tidal, Apple Music. There's access to that. However, it's not on the side of the users, the people that want to listen, that IP limits them. But it is on the side of the people that are putting that content on the streaming platforms. Because where you go, whether on Spotify or on Apple, you'll access it. As a user, you just have to, you just need to have your favorite streaming app and listen to anything. Right now, there's what we call content aggregation. I can use one platform, put there my song, and it's everywhere, so there's no limitation. The beauty of it is in the digital rights management of the music. How do these platforms also track that your song has been played in China, in France? So there are just some tracking codes that are put within the music, but that is just when you're at the entry level, when you're putting the music, but not on the users. So users have that right, either to use freemium options, stream for free.
Now for an upcoming artist, doesn't that limit their chances of breaking out? Okay, not like their chances, they eventually break out, but doesn't it slow down the process?
If I may add to what David is saying, we've been emphasizing that IP rights, and particularly copyright, it's up to you to exercise, right? Now, with what Kenneth added to these principles not existing in a vacuum but being applied to culture. I think that's the point that David is trying to bring out. I'm going to use 3 examples to just affirm exactly what he said. I was talking to a producer, a renowned producer, a really big Ugandan artist, about 2 days ago, actually, Joshua Baraka's listening party. And we were breaking down earnings of like musicians, and he was telling me that, you know that if any artist charged 1.5 for 4 gigs a weekend in a year, they'd make to 100 million. And you know, I started asking these questions based on my understanding of this framework. So what contractual agreements do you have? And basically what he told me was like, hey, chikulu mogera luzungu. Like English doesn't work here, you know? So there's this whole system that he can exploit, but there are other systems that have existed. I mean, how was Chameleon, Bebe Cool, and all these people earning money even before we started these copyright conversations? What he's saying that, you know, my mom would tell me about how they'd learn songs. There'd be a man with a guitar, you know, just walking around villages. You hear music, you come. That's how you learn songs. What's the IP arrangement with him? Now, let's move on to this side of the structure. And you're asking, why should someone care about their streams? We all know the example of Kate Bush and her song Running Up That Hill that came out 30 years ago. Yes. You know, she's been number one. She was number one. I don't know if she's still number one on the Billboard charts for a really long time, earning and really introduced to this generation with just that. How is she benefiting from that? It's because within the system, she gave cognizance to this structure. The moral rights, at that time there were no streamings, there was no mechanical rights, but that bleeds into this new era of streaming. And on TikTok, everyone's streaming that song. On Spotify, everyone is streaming that song. And with those numbers that identify a song as a property, Billboard can use those statistics to say, this is the most listened song, and therefore it warrants number one. I'll give you a second example. Maurice Kiria, a couple of years ago, sued MTN for using his song without permission. And everyone was like, why do you need to do that? Like, it should be the opposite. You should be saying, do you need more songs so that other people are, you know, listening to my music? Yeah. But his decision was like, no, let me use the system. And when he went to court to enforce his rights, he had a hefty sum in damages that MTN gave him. And everyone was like, wait, you can get that just by enforcing a right? Just like someone discovering, because you have a land title, you can earn rent. And someone going, wait, because I own this land title, I can ask people for rent? You know, that's the exact same situation. Then I'm going to use one last example with Burna Boy. We have had musicians as big as Miriam Makeba, Angelique Kidjo, African global artists that have managed to pierce that veil of culture and the continent to win Grammys, to be nominated, to have their songs in movies that are nominated for Oscars. And since that generation, there's kind of been this drought. And then suddenly you have artists like Wizkid setting the precedent with being nominated in non-world categories for the Grammys. And now with the influence of America, the Grammys are a big thing. I mean, even if you are BTS from Korea, winning the Grammys is going to be a big deal. Even if we have Palm Awards here, winning a Grammy is going to be a bigger deal. But why is he able to do that? It's because he's plugged into the system, yeah? And when Universal Music sits down, it's a language they can all understand, yeah? So even if it's an upcoming artist like me, who honestly doesn't even have a song that has 10,000 streams, should that opportunity come with a distributor? I have these contracts and this arrangement that plugs in with the global musical language of how they understand the process. That will make me big in the night.
Let me just, again, we're going to conclude, time is really running out. But just on that, we've had Keiko get signed up by Sony, and that was almost like the end of her career. To us, the fans, we really don't know the nitty-gritty. But we've actually had 2 scenarios of big platforms signing up our own people, and they die out. How is that so, if that's like a solution?
For me, I'll go back to culture just briefly to allow Ken finish. It's like saying, because I have this land title, now I can't get rent. It's up to you to be innovative about how you can, you know how people build these buildings and they say, I have a building with office space to rent, but it's empty. You can't blame the system. You have to be innovative because there's people that have been signed. For example, Irene Talley, I know a lot of people use a metric of success of she's not having shows, she's not doing this. But if you just looked at the statistics, if she was able to share with you that she's earning just from that distribution deal with Universal Music, or like APAS's decision to be very stringent with receiving his royalties, such that you think he's not successful because he's not performing at every concert, but he's doing better than these people that are everywhere. You know what I mean? It's about applying that mind, and it's the same thing that happened in history. All the money was coming from printing these big discs, and they'd sell. That's how they call them mechanical royalties, because there was this process of putting this recording on a big, those, what are they called? Vinyls, yes. And then now CDs, and now we don't live in that age anymore. So now how do mechanical royalties express themselves? It's just culture morphing in a different way. And for us, the African version of vinyls was me sing a song, you learn the song, he learns the song from you. Just oral tradition. Just that's how we learn all these songs that we did in MDD. They were sung apparently for, who was that king, that young king? Because the Batiko are the royal clan. And it was just a song to make Daudi Chua not cry. But all these years later, how do I know that song? Is there a CD? Is there a USB? No, so you're thinking about the principles applied through culture. You can't blame the system, blame the innovations, yeah? It's about you being smart enough to use that system, that universal language, because BTS is doing a very different thing, And I could go on and on with so many examples, but I think you get the point that I'm saying. Yeah, that's it.
Definitely. Now, closing, I'll ask Kenneth, I think, will conclude with this. We've had, and commendable, not just the 50th annual symposium, most of them have been talking about IP, some of the conversations on our podcast. We've had the Uganda Music Association come out some time back, some years back. They have enforced, even though the government tried to change by destroying, by closing out people who are reselling music, conversations online, DJs outside like Ericom, trading people's music. How do we then mainstream IP in our processes? How can it work, really?
I think, first and foremost, we can do that first by the sensitization that we're doing, which is having podcasts like this, having events like the KTS Symposium, and many other engagements where people get to understand copyright and get to understand intellectual property. As I mentioned, I think sometimes we can get too lost in the legalese, sometimes we can get too lost in the lingua, and I've already mentioned this before, the titles, that we use, that we give these things, but copyright exists even without all these things, and I will really, really, really stress that. So I think sensitization really is top of my list for people to be able to understand. And beyond that, I'd also say policy. I'd say, although we do have a Copyright Act, although we do have laws that look at intellectual property generally, I feel that perhaps it may be time to have policies looking at particular sectors. And so I think if each sector was looked at individually and try and see how the law perhaps would be able to support that particular sector. And I think keeping in mind what we always discuss, with being that if you leave the context of a particular group of people, culture being one of those contexts, but if you also make laws without perhaps considering the environment where or within which those laws would operate, then it becomes difficult to be able to enforce them. It becomes difficult to be able to promote them. So I think Uganda has a very interesting business model for music. And this is something that David and Isabel perhaps may also mention as they're giving their parting shots. So if we then try to copy lock, stock, and barrel, as they say, we copy everything the way that it is, let's say, in Nigeria, the way that it is in Europe, it may not work here. So I think what we need to do is to have more engagement, to bring the artists, to bring the lawmakers, to sit down and say, okay, if we're creating hybrid systems, how can we create a hybrid system that works for the Ugandan? How can we create a system that does not perhaps stop, because the biggest, and you already asked the question, how does an artist, or how can an artist be able to make money from their music, or how will people be able to hear their music if there's a restriction as to where it can be able to go? But we need to move our discussions, or we need to be more cognizant of the fact that IP exists to be able to protect, IP exists to be able to facilitate. Now, in helping artists or in helping musicians being able to reap from their creations, it's important, if we're looking at the regulatory aspect, to have laws that consider all these contexts that I am talking about. And I think really beyond that, it's really the understanding that organization does not mean that you will be unseen, or organization doesn't mean that you will perish. I think many Ugandans, we fear organized things. But you see that if something is organized, at least the industries that are organized, or even homes perhaps that are organized, you find that they have more peace, and it is easier to be able to track and see, okay, where can we change things? Because if you're not organized, it's very difficult to be able to collect data, and that data is then what you can then be able to use in service delivery, is then what you can be able to use if you're looking at the music industry. That data aggregated properly is what can help you to be able to understand where you need to focus and where you need to perhaps let things lie.
Thank you, Kenneth. Isabel, you'll also answer almost the same question. I'll just add, I'll ask you as an artist, do you pay for all the music you listen to?
Yeah, I really believe in this language, as I stated, this system. And why I believe in it the most is because of the times we live in. The song I will sing, the question I will always begin with in whatever room I am, is what is the culture? You know? We live in a post-colonial setting, yeah? And now if I'm singing music, what kind of artists am I competing with? I'm competing with Katy Perry, I'm competing with every English, singing artist. But what's different from me is my experiences, my expressions. I mean, we can use the example of Nigeria. Burna Boy sings in Pidgin, which is a sort of English, but a result of the fact that the British came and they brought English. My idea and what I believe in tandem with all these things that Ken is saying, is let's analyze the culture. When you look at the pattern in history, why Rome was the country it was, yes, they had a great army, yes, they were really organized, but what they exported the most was their culture. Up to now, roads are a cultural innovation of Romans that lives on all these years later. You go to the next big thing. Let's go to Germany. Let's go on the other side. Why were they big? Nationalism. They said, we are the superior race. And they almost took over the whole world because one person implanted that idea in every single German. You come to America right now. You could say, yes, they're so democratic, they're organized, they have the best army. It's their culture through Hollywood. You watch a movie, and because of that movie, there's a trend across the whole world because they're, sharing their movies with the whole world. So culture breeds influence. Influence starts discussion. Discussion changes law. It's power. That's how the money comes. All these are ancillary. Being remembered. All those come after. But the core thing is beginning with culture. That's a conglomeration of people. So even as we discuss the laws, we have to look at the culture. Okay, so we're not calling it a moral right, but how do I know Bebe Cool sang that song? That's the moral right. So maybe let's call it something else, but let's look at the culture and let's discuss these things. This, I really have in my personal experience as an artist, been put down by the impression of things that already exist. Why do you sing in English? Do you know you'd make more music if you sang in Luganda? But I don't speak Luganda. Why should I sing Luganda? You'd make more money if you changed how you dress. No, but that's not me as a person, So I got confused beginning as an artist. What should I do? Who should I be? Until the answer was, I just need to be myself, right? Because that's what creativity is, and it's within culture. So yes, I won't make as much money as Gravity Mtuju, and I can accept that, because that's not the expression of the culture right now. But my reality doesn't need to be negated because of that. Maybe in 100 years, there'll be someone who resonates with what I'm singing. I mean, with the books we studied in literature, Emily Bronte didn't even know that her book would be a success. She died before she knew. And now it's studied 200 years later. That's the effect, and I feel that's the principle. Follow the culture, you'll get the whole, equation solved. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Yes, David. As you conclude, I'll ask you to also explain what realities are and how artists here can can get their royalties for their music. But this is like an international problem because when you listen to the Kanye Wests, the Big Seans, everyone is complaining for the same. So I was reading some of your articles, and you're very passionate about having our creators here get their royalties, but how achievable is that?
Well, I'll start by defining royalties. A royalty is a profit that you make from selling intellectual property. It's not that money that you receive there, then let's say I'm a songwriter. Now an artist has paid me to give them a demo. But later, when that artist uses that song, there are some profits that should be trickling back to me as a songwriter. So those are the profits. So if I'm to explain royalties, they are broad in the music industry, but they depend on the market. Yeah. We have what we call synchronization royalties. That's when you put your music in commercial adverts, soundtracks to films and everything. There's money that comes from that place. There are royalties that come from streaming, that we call streaming royalties. There are also many, there are also sub-split. There are those direct royalties that come when your music is listened to on Spotify, that Spotify pays you. But also we go deep and there's what we call mechanical royalties. Mechanical royalties is a fraction of the streaming or of the, when an artist sells the music, it's a fraction that should be paid to the person who composed. So there's that fraction. Then we have performing royalties. I would say there are businesses that use our music to make money. Like a bar. Yeah. If you play good music, many people will attend and they will drink more. So they are making money out of the music as a product. So they are collecting societies or taxing bodies in the music industry that tax these businesses that make money out of using music. It goes far to radios, to restaurants, anything. Yes. Then there are other types of royalties like dubbing royalties. When a DJ makes a collection, remember in the Copyright Act there's also that derivative nature. When somebody makes a good collection of something, they also have that right. So if a DJ dubs a good mixtape and they make money out of it, there are also some mechanical royalties that goes back to the owners of these songs. So there are many. There are neighboring rights. Neighboring rights is another type of performing right. Yeah. Performing rights is the money that they give to the people who own the compositions, the authors, the publishers, and the composers. However, on the other side, when some money is also collected from bars for airplays and radio airplays, there's money that also goes to the sound recording owners, and we call that neighboring rights. So there are many types of royalties in there. However, it's all about the ecosystem and being able to learn it as an industry. I like fixing, but it needs me to fix when somebody understands what I'm trying to fix. If an artist approaches me, then I tell them that this and this one is what you're missing. Then I can help them fix that. So right now in the industry, we have very many talented people. And we also, on the other side of policy and legal issues, we have very good laws. However, there's still a section of people missing. Like what I do. bring this legal perspective and now do it in reality. There are very few people. But the industry is always growing. Even the people would be knowing that they've spent time in IP rights management, they'll also tell you I'm missing something like this. It's a whole industry. But we keep on learning, and slowly by slowly we'll get to the point of collecting everything.
Thank you. Well, this comes to the end of our very first live Big Conversations by Ordinary People podcast. You can be sure that I'll have all the panelists on the podcast to have extensive, lengthy conversations. They seem to be very interesting. I'll set up some for myself and some for Kenneth Matovu, who is catching this online. But Kenneth, thank you. This has been such a very great opportunity for us. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, David.